Today we saw the battle between the two youngest players in the tournament, 17-year-old Richard Rapport and 20-year-old Ding Liren. And, well, if you recall, their encounter in the first half of the tournament was pretty dramatic, and today was also similar. It was a King's Indian, as Ding Liren said earlier. He knows no other opening against d4, and Rapport banged out a rather unusual variation, that is putting the knight on g3. Now this has been seen before, but it doesn't have a brilliant reputation. You just have to play in a slightly, well, if you don't play in the stereotyped King's Indian way, then black is doing well. h5. Well, it can be very useful to push this knight out of the way, and Rapport defends against this with h4. And now the trick is this: if you play e5, then this can be dubious. It looks like just the normal way for black to play, but actually, for example, here, I mean, black has not played the best moves, then this sacrifice is extremely dangerous. And yeah, this gives white a long-term attack, and it's very difficult for black to defend. So that's the big trick in this variation. But if black doesn't fall for that and plays as Ding Liren did, then things are rather different. So c5. So white really has to close the position. And now b5. Now the idea with this is that you're playing a kind of Benko gambit, but the knight really will stand quite poorly on g3. You can see, unless it sacrifices, then it has nowhere to go. And without this pin, then the sacrifices in this case really aren't terribly strong. So if white takes this pawn, then, well, you could take on b5, or maybe knight e5, followed by taking and bishop a6 and all the usual pressure on these files on the queen side. But also, you know, this knight on f5 or on e5 is terribly strong, because if white ever pushes this away, then this g4 square is available, and that's the problem for white when he's, you know, includes these moves. So Rapport played b3, which leaves a few lumps vulnerable on this diagonal, and Ding Liren exploited this straight away with knight h7. So this is attacked, and the bishop is attacked as well, so it came back to defend. And now b4, and you can see, well, Ding Liren took this rook. He said after the game that, you know, maybe he should have just ignored it and played with knight e5. And, well, in this case, I mean, I think already black has a very pleasant position. You can follow up with e6 in typical Benoni style, or perhaps bishop d7 as well to aim at this knight. I actually thought that knight b6 was a strong continuation as well, again with the idea of simply e6 and maybe pushing the a pawn and just leave the rook hanging. If it moves away, then, you know, black could well control the a file, and it's very hard to see how white is gaining sufficient counterplay in this position. But anyway, Ding Liren, he's a principled chap, and he took that rook off and closed the diagonal. Now, of course, the big disadvantage when you lose your King's Indian bishop is that these squares around the king are weakened. However, it's hard to imagine that in this position black is going to be in trouble, but actually things are not so simple. Well, I mean, in principle, white would like to open this diagonal, but this is a very poor move, in fact, because black threatens queen f6 and threatening this one and a queen exchange, and if castles, then queen h4, and black is already doing very well. So white can't open it, but incredibly, this is not so simple, this position, because suddenly after f4, this is very, very important. It's the only way for white to play. Obviously that can't be taken because of the mate. And now rook a7. After the game, Ding said that maybe rook a7 isn't good, but it's hard to imagine how strong white's initiative is. And now f5 is very important. It just, well, prevents any files opening, and also, white has this huge space advantage, which means it's very difficult for black's minor pieces to enter the game as well. And suddenly it's not so clear. Queen c1 is a good move. The queen shuffles over, and now Rapport played bishop g5, which leads to a kind of forcing sequence. But Ding Liren after the game said that he thought that queen e3 was a much stronger move, and it's not clear what black is doing at all in this position, and this might actually gain a tempo in the game because Rapport played queen e3 anyway. So anyway, let's see the game. Bishop g5. Now if f6, you can see that this undermines the support for g6, and in that case, well, I mean, possibly the bishop would just come back, and then h5 is going to fall. So this was taken. By the way, if queen e8, then you can just castle, and, well, again, it's not clear what black is doing in this position. It could be that white will just play with f6, and that's a very difficult position indeed. So this was taken, and king g7. And the Chinese player thought he was better, and that, after f6, the king could just come to f8, and after knight b6, we'll exchange this one off, and black will be able to open the h file. But instead, Rapport played queen e3. Good move. So bringing the queen closer to the king side. And his idea was plain. He just wanted to break through with his sacrifice. So now white is a whole rook down. But it's incredible how well coordinated white's pieces are, and how difficult it is for black to bring these pieces into the defense. g6, another good move, breaking open the king position. And now, for example, you want to play knight f6 to free the rook along the second rank. Then queen g5, pinning. And this was demonstrated by Ding after the game. And incredibly, it is still legal for white to castle, and this is going to be winning for white. For example, after this, and, well, again, this pin. Whoops, not like that. Not even like that, but like that. Okay, back we go. So king g8 defends against g7. And now, when we were watching this online, at first we thought that g7 was actually winning, and queen h3 with the threat of queen e6. But incredibly, knight f8, well, it's a very good move, and suddenly black is coordinating. So after this is taken, for example, and then rook comes across to g7, you can see that black suddenly is coordinated, and this one is left out of the game. But sometimes that knight plays a very important role. Let's have a look. And this is very coolly played by Rapport. He's just stabilizing the position, stabilizing the knight. And now, after the game, Ding said that after queen f5, he was intending knight b6. But it turns out that this move is not so good. He gave the variation something like this, and then king h8. But actually, and he thought the black was winning, but actually in this position, it turns out that queen f3, just a calm retreat, because the bishop was threatening the queen, it turns out that In fact, white is winning this after g5, incredibly. If queen takes, then queen f8 is mate, and after this, well, this wins. Well, there are defences, and probably the best move is rook c7. I'm sure that Ding would have found this move. I mean, what struck me after the game was how brilliant a calculator he is. I mean, he missed a couple of things, but I think he would have found the right way out. And in this position, well, black is probably doing okay because this protects the bishop, and now you can bring the knight into play. So back we go. But Rapport played an extraordinary move here, knight b6. I mean, a really scary move to have to meet. So just giving up this knight, but it was doing nothing on a4 anyway, and that allows the knight to come into f6 with check. So he's given up the queen, but black has, look how many pieces black has for it, 2 rooks, a knight and a bishop. But remarkably, this position really isn't clear at all. For example, if you play knight d7, which looks like it kind of holds everything, well, in fact, in this position, I think queen e7 is a good move, threatening queen f7. So knight c8, and now Rapport checked on d8. Ding thought he should have taken here. The key is, if black can coordinate his pieces, you can see they're spread to the different corners of the board, but if he can coordinate these pieces, then he's going to do okay. Ding thought in this position that black should play like this, but it seems that this is absolutely not clear. And here white has an incredible initiative. Black has given up no material. Black still has, seemingly an overwhelming material advantage, but it's very hard for these pieces to coordinate. Let's go back. So perhaps queen e5 was better, but I mean there does seem to be a way for black to play that. But after queen d8, now black was able to coordinate. In this case, it's not as good. Black finds security. And in this position, you can see there are no checks to the king, and Ding found an excellent move. The bishop comes to g6 to cover the king, and this also frees the rook. And now the writing is on the wall. Now maybe Rapport could have played a little better, but you can see that once that black has coordinated his forces, then this should be winning. And indeed that's what happened. There's one very nice trick here that Ding pointed out. If queen takes b4, he didn't play d6. If queen takes b4, then check. And if king here, now a wonderful move, rook c2. So this actually traps white's king. And then after this discovered check, black is going to be winning. Great move. But d6 happened, and now it is actually pretty easy because black manages to take this pawn and then goes for the king. Now, I'm just going to go through the next moves very quickly without comment. I think it's quite clear to see that white's king is going to be for it. I hope I'm not going too quickly and that the software behaves itself. But I have to show you the final position because we have one of my favourite checkmates coming up, namely the double-barrel shotgun checkmate. Here we go again. Takes a little time to organise, but black gets there in the end. And in this position, Rapport resigned because we have this famous checkmate again. Fantastic fight, and Ding Liren proved once again what a talent he is, and he now leads the tournament with 13 points, just ahead of Etienne Bacrot, who has 12 points. He drew today, again by the skin of his teeth, against Vachier-Lagrave, who's in third with 11 points, and Moisenko lost. He has 10 points. Thanks for watching.